Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our webinar series on social media and how to use it for research. We're really happy to welcome Shreya today. Shreya is a PhD student at the University of Amsterdam in the Amsterdam School of Communication Research, so right bang on. And she will talk about her PhD thesis today of the way digital platforms shape the social world and how we interact with each other and the information on these platforms. She has a specific focus on the environmental discourse on social media that she will be talking about. It is a slightly different topic than what we often cover in this series, so which is really exciting to venture out and show really the whole breadth of how we can use social media for our research. Just a few ground rules. Shreya will first do her talk, and in the meantime, please put any questions you have in the Q&A function. This is just a better way for us to monitor questions. And if we see any questions that are important for clarification, we will interrupt Shreya briefly to let her explain a bit better. Because obviously we don't want anyone to get lost. But most of the question we will just wait until the end when we have our Q&A. Yeah, with no further ado, over to you, Shreya, then.
Right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Anya, for the introduction. Once again, I have to reiterate that this network has been super beneficial for me as an early career researcher who's sort of starting out with social media research, and I've benefited. So it's only fitting that I'm here to show you what I've been up to and just learn from the opinion of colleagues and peers. So very excited to be here. Well, to again introduce myself, I'm Shreya. I'm a final year PhD candidate at the University of Amsterdam, working essentially with social media data to understand how people talk about the environment, who these people are, and how audience responds to environmental messaging on social media. So this is a bit different than the talks that we're used to in this group, in the sense that I will not only talk about recruiting participants via social media, but also sort of approaches to selecting content and how they can impact not only the analysis, but also the results greatly. It's only fair to then sort of start by introducing my PhD project. The title of it is Environmental Discourse on Social Media, with a focus on analyzing what are the messages that are being shared about the environment. Are there networks of users that share similar messages? Do these networks interact with each other? And also, who are these people, users, who are sharing environmental messaging on social media? My thesis is supervised by really what I call the dream team here, Marijn Myers, Selena Smith, and Edith Smith, who are all researchers here at ASCOR. And it's been kind of great to be challenged by them, and I learn a lot from them. So the starting point of my PhD was, of course, doing a literature review, and what we found about previous environmental research and communication research in particular, we found that it was mostly about climate change. Now, the environment, of course, is related to climate change, but it includes other aspects, for example, water, like lack of access to fresh water or biosphere integrity and everything. So, but we found that these other topics are discussed much less than climate change. So even in just hearing about the environment, I think also from newspapers and reports, I think you might agree that we only sort of hear climate change as the buzzword. It's become synonymous with environment. We also found that specifically on social media, there was more skeptical content when it comes to the environment. So people who are either disengaged or people who are dismissive. So people who don't believe in climate change or the man-made aspects of it. There was also some evidence for polarization. So people who sort of believe in climate change do not tend to interact with people who do not believe in climate change, in the sense that they exist in their own networks, their own clusters, and sort of see the similar information and feed each other similar information, and rarely get exposed to information from other side of the network. And of course, not only just in environmental communication, but in science, there's a dominance of perspectives from the global north, representing the Western educated, industrialized countries at the expense of the countries in global south, which actually face greater catastrophes as a result of the environmental crises that we are facing and are much less prepared to deal with them. So we sort of wanted to address this, and being a methods person, for me, a lot of this was also about how we study environmental discourse. So while looking at the studies uh, on social media, I found that most studies would only use maybe one or two hashtags to select data. So, for example, only hashtag climate change to select tweets that are about environmental issues, or if they're looking for conspiracy thinking, then they will use sort of hashtags and search terms that are specific to conspiracy theories. Now, the thing about internet is you can find anything you go and look for. So with this kind of a hunch, our idea was to diversify this idea of what it means, what the environment means in the public's eye. And the underlying basis for my thesis actually is this planetary boundaries framework. So scientists for the longest time have been saying that climate change, of course, is important, but there are actually 8 other environmental issues that we need to pay attention to, and these have been quantified as thresholds that we should not cross. Otherwise, the Earth would collapse because of, well, environmental crises. And these issues range from land system change, so deforestation for agriculture, for urbanization, but also freshwater change, lack of access to fresh water. And we've actually crossed 6 out of these 9 boundaries. So it's really alarming that these other issues don't come up in the public discourse, at least on social media. But the thing is, it's also likely related to the way we study environmental issues. So basically, planetary boundaries could be more inclusive of global threats of environmental issues, because climate change is a really big buzzword, but it's not really recognized around the world. But for example, lack of access to fresh water is widely recognized and experienced in Africa. And of course, because some of these issues might be more relatable, because climate change remains a rather abstract problem, whereas things like biospheric integrity, like wildfires and everything, people are experiencing these. So the planetary boundaries framework seemed like a good starting point to see if people are talking about environment as a whole, or if really all people talk about is climate change. So basically, in my PhD project, we have a series of studies where we look at environmental messaging beyond climate change. We look at social actors, that is the stakeholders, opinion leaders who are posting about environmental issues, but also beyond the global north. And then we look at how audience engages with environmental content online. So looking at both active and passive behavior. So for example, in terms of engagement, commenting and sharing is considered a more active online behavior, as opposed to simply scrolling or liking, which is rather passive. So basically, this study just came out in Climactic Change, was the first study that we did on Twitter, which is now X, but I will continue to refer to it as Twitter going forward, excuse me. And there we were basically trying to understand whether other issues posited in the planetary boundaries framework are also discussed by the public in an online discourse, and also sort of compare where are the people who post these environmental tweets based. Are they mostly based in the global north or in the global south? So now we come to like my favorite aspect. based on the planetary boundaries framework, we sort of made this list of open keywords, and I had around 68 keywords to begin with. In my knowledge, this is the largest list of such environmental search terms used in a study. We also wanted to go further and have some sort of a efficiency measure. So we tried and validate this list by first using these search terms to retrieve 5,000 tweets. And then we calculated two measures to sort of see how these search terms compare. So the first thing was the recall proportion, which means out of the 5,000 tweets, how many tweets had the word climate in it, or how many tweets had the word garbage in it. And of course, precision, whether these tweets that were retrieved, were they related to the environment or not? So we sort of, just to give you an example, there were search terms that had a very high recall proportion. So for example, out of 5,000, toxic pulled the second most tweets, but the precision was super low because tweets were about the song Toxic by Britney Spears and not toxic related to the environment. And then similarly, in the opposite direction, words like emission, probably not used by public as much, did have a lower recall, which means that the proportion of tweets that it retrieved out of the 5,000 tweets was okay-ish, but it had 100% emission. So emission was consistently, at least we found in our data set, used in the environmental context. So sort of having this wide list and then validating it, we based on this pilot study, narrowed down this list to 50 search terms. So we went from 62 to 50, which still is a pretty long list, I would say. But we really did want to cast a wide net and see what really is the environmental discourse and not just the climate change or sustainability discourse. And this, of course, affected our results as well. So just to give you an idea of the rough big data analysis that we did, we used this list of search terms to retrieve 2 million tweets and sort of did a bunch of big data analysis. So for example, we tried to, we retrieved the users who posted these tweets and also retrieved all of their followers and friends. So in that way, we ended up with over 300 million users. And then we sort of tried to see if there were clusters within this network that were talking about a specific topic, so on and so forth. We also wanted to know, of course, what people are posting about with regards to the environment. So not just climate change, but what is being said about emissions and what is being said about biosphere integrity and stuff like that. We wanted to know what is the sentiment. So are they talking about these environmental issues in a positive or a negative light, or is there no sentiment to it? And then looking at the users themselves, we did a textual analysis of their profile description, as well as the clusters that we identified. We wanted to see if there was interaction between those clusters, that users in one cluster that probably talked about sustainability maybe also interacted with a bunch of scientists that were talking about energy efficiency. So we were also interested in the cross-contamination across these clusters. And finally, of course, we wanted to see where in the world they are based. And so already, like, out of about 500,000 authors, the geographical data was only available on 83,000 people roughly. So that already gives you an indication that, a textual user-based analysis is much easier. But when you get into like geographical data, not everyone's comfortable sharing. There's also API limitations. And I don't even think that Twitter API would allow us to do this now. So this was just before Twitter API shut down. So I was still able to do this for free, but good luck doing this again. Yeah, so in a nutshell, we did find that climate change was talked more often than other other threats. In fact, the clusters that we found, and I do have this slide later on, but I wanted to sort of keep this more method-centric. So if you want to see the clusters, I'm happy to show you later. But we ended up naming all of our clusters as climate change and sustainability, climate change and biodiversity, because even when other environmental issues were being mentioned, they were mentioned in context of climate change. So it seems like on Twitter, climate change indeed was the most popular environmental threat. However, contrary to previous research, we found that at least in our data set of 2 million tweets, environmental content was largely pro-environmental, and the different clusters showed sufficient interaction between each other. So a bunch of scientists who are talking about energy efficiency is also engaging with, for example, businessmen and women who are sort of in the energy industry. So we found quite the opposite finding of compared to previous studies, just by casting a wider net, because I can understand like climate change is very polarizing, whereas other environmental issues may be less polarizing because less and less people talk about them. There's less politicians talk about them, so we don't have exactly a scheme about them. And this was Global North did dominate all the English language discussions. So we found 9 clusters of users, and the representation of users from Global South was greatest in one cluster, but it was still 6% compared to 94% from the Global North. So it was just abysmal overrepresentation of Global North. But of course, this is English language data, and it's not as straightforward. People in the Global South also post in English. They also post in their own languages. Same goes for people in the Global North. But yes, at least for English language, we did find that Global North was dominating this discussion, much like previous studies found. So basically, just by casting a wider net, at least on Twitter, we did not see that there was much discussion about these other important environmental issues. Whoop, sorry, these are automatic. There you go. Okay, back to it. All right, so basically after this study, I also have to point out that this was the first study that I worked on as a PhD student, and Elon Musk decided to free the bird. So some of the findings of this study needed to be reinterpreted in this new context. So for example, I cannot be very confident in the finding that most content was pro-environmental, because it is likely that the content that most of the content is pro-environmental, but people are still exposed to negative content more often because of the algorithm. So scientists were actively targeted on Twitter, and shadow banning was quite popular. So we did reinterpret our findings in that light, and with a big caveat about how fragile the social media ecosystem is. And we as researchers, are sort of always catching up. Yeah, this frustrated me a little bit, but it was also a research opportunity area to sort of talk more about digital justice and digital rights, especially in the Global South, where the governments are also sort of very anti-digital literacy and stuff like that. So this was the first study that we did. And then, of course, we had to sort of move on to TikTok because it became the new hot thing, and everyone was using it. And in environmental literature, at least we found that audiovisual communication is analyzed much less as compared to textual conversations. So then we sort of tried to do the same thing on TikTok, but here we were really interested in looking at the message features. So what are the topics that are being discussed? How are they discussed? And also look at actors more closely, being able to categorize these actors, which we were not able to do with the Twitter study. and also look at how engagement relates to different message characteristics. So for example, if videos that talk about climate change get more views on TikTok as compared to videos that talk about vegan food, for example. So we sort of looked at messages, social actors, and engagement, which is sort of the underrunning theme. We use the same list of validated keywords to arrive at environmental hashtags. So again, we wanted to cast a wide net, and we might have been able to use these search terms, but on TikTok specifically, the videos are really filed according to hashtags. So we decided to take this list and convert it into most popular hashtags. And in the next slide, you'll see that it took us quite a few steps. We did this in 2 languages because well, beyond the global north, right? So I had to do something. So we sort of used this, the same list that we'd used in the Twitter study to then extract the most popular environmental hashtags. And by most popular, I mean these hashtags related to the environment were present in below in the figure captions of most of the videos, as well as they had a large number of views. So how did we arrive at this? Well, we started by using this list of 50 environment-related search terms. Then we extracted the data in 2 ways. We went to the landing page of TikTok. So it's called the For You page. This is where you search for videos related to your interest. This is where you see random content. And then we also retrieved all the hashtags that are underneath these videos. Then we found whatever the 100 most commonly occurring hashtags were. We searched for the number of views associated with these hashtags. And then TikTok has a trending page. So we double checked just to make sure that we did not miss any environment related hashtags that were super popular, that were trending, so to speak. Then we performed k-mean clustering because we wanted there to be more common and more frequent. So the hashtags needed to occur the most number of times, and they needed to have the most number of views relatively. So we performed a k-means clustering analysis to sort of find 100 most common and most viewed environment-related hashtags. We then selected 30 hashtags out of these 100 because 100 would have been too much in 2 languages. So we went with the top 30. The English hashtags were translated into Spanish, which is sort of a limitation of this analysis, because ideally I would have wanted to convert the search terms into Spanish and then go from there, do the hashtag analysis again. But I don't speak Spanish, so this is the approach that we went with. Then also because we wanted to focus on the people who are talking about the environment, not only did we directly collect videos based on these hashtags, but we also selected accounts based on these hashtags. And then we selected videos from also these accounts that were talking about the environment. So we ended up with 4,800 videos, and we did a manual content analysis, coding several features of these videos, ranging from the topic of the video to the music of the video, for example. So yeah, it was quite a process, but we're very confident that we were able to sort of collect TikTok data in the time that TikTok API was not available to researchers, and also make sure that we more or less did select popular environmental hashtags and not just random hashtags. Yeah, so this is the approach. Right, and so similar to the previous study, only this time with a content analysis in 2 languages. We analyzed 4,800 TikToks to see which types of message characteristics exist in environmental videos. So ranging from topics to ideology, for example, what is the reasoning people are giving for adopting environmental behavior? Is it to save money? Is it to be healthy? Sentiment again, and then also just some audiovisual features of the videos themselves. We also looked at profile information of social actors, though I have to say, TikTokers don't really put profile information like Twitter users do. So this was already quite challenging. And then, of course, looking at the engagement and seeing how it varies with messages, social actors. And because we were working with both English and Spanish language data, it did make sense to also check if engagement varies by language. So language was actually a moderator here. And this time, it was better news somehow. Climate change was way less talked about as compared to some other topics like environmental pollution, waste management. Biodiversity was in fact the most talked about. So again, same list of search terms, but different results because different platform, I assume. We also did find a lot of irrelevant videos. So TikTokers apparently use hashtags under videos that are not actually describing the video, which is something that's less prevalent in Twitter or Instagram even. So we were, well, excited by these results, and also found sort of varying actors. So we had individual actors ranging from influencers to activists, but we also had, a little bit of governmental accounts. So governments from the global south, actually, we had political leaders with their TikTok channels talking about the environment. There were international organizations like UNESCO and all of that. Aggregated accounts are essentially accounts that compile TikToks from all other accounts. So a fair bit of that as well. So again, like using the same list, and again, by no means is it a definite list, but being able to use a validated list across platforms sort of gave us insights into how environmental discourse differs from platform to platform as well. Yeah, and just to give you like some key conclusions. So of course, we did find that compared to at least Twitter, TikTok was diverse beyond the topic of climate change. However, the messaging was quite vague and unclear, as in if people are talking about adopting a plant-based diet, it would likely be a vegan recipe, but without ever even mentioning the environment, which is not really connecting an environmental behavior to valuing the environment. And of course, individual social actors dominated. So your influencers, activists, scientists, just individual users did create most of the environmental content. One thing that really encouraged me was that compared to climate change, like topics like waste management and biosphere integrity got a lot more engagement. So not only was climate change talk about relatively less, but it also got less engagement. So talking about newer environmental ideas that people have not heard of is likely to be more engaging in terms of at least likes, shares, comments, etc. Yeah, and we also found some relationships between engagement and the audio-visual features. So, for example, the vlog style of video where a person's just looking at you, looking at the phone and talking to you directly is very popular, but that does not necessarily get the most engagement on environmental TikTok. So in fact, videos where a person is interviewing some other person, so it's sort of like a hosted interview, tend to get more engagement as compared to vlog style videos, which is surprising because most videos on TikTok are vlog style videos. So yeah, and we were also able to sort of demonstrate that conveying environmental issues in a global context. So, for example, there were videos describing extreme weather events around the world that got higher engagement, but also relating personal experiences. For example, I did this in my backyard, and for this reason, sort of got engagement. And emotions, of course, emotionally intense messaging was engaging, not necessarily increasing pro-environmental behavior, but engaging in terms of number of views, likes, comments, etc. Alarmingly, we also did find that compared to individuals, engagement with governments and sustainability organizations who post about the environment was low. So all of this sort of we were able to demonstrate with that starting point of casting a wider net and not just looking at climate change, but also a more holistic idea of the environment. Right, so that was all about selecting content, but I did also do some work recruiting participants on social media. So I thought I could talk about that a little bit real quick. And that's mostly just screenshots of some practical stuff that I thought, might be useful to some of you. But I mean, are there any questions before or should I finish this? All right, perfect. Right, so as I was doing this PhD, there's also, multiple lab science happening, and I really sort of love being a part of these global projects. So this paper just came out in Science Advances now, where basically a group of researchers from NYU organized this project, and the idea was to compare 11 very well-established environmental interventions across 63 countries. So they started with a list of 70, and in the end, it ended up being 63 countries. I'm from India, and I contributed data from India, and these data were collected on Facebook. So I did end up using social media to also recruit participants. So I thought I could just show you that. The usual pipeline is that I make a project page because I don't have a Facebook account myself. So so I've also been blogged and stuff sometimes, but it usually works out okay in the end. So you don't really need a Facebook account for this. You make a project page, you register it, and then I usually like to put less information. We do have obviously a very rigorous ethical process. So once participants sign up, we do send them like a detailed information sheet as well as obtained informed consent. But in terms of costs, I really like that for the visibility that it gives your project, the cost of the ads itself is like 30 euros for recruiting 444 participants. And of course, 444 participants were recruited for this study, which means they clicked on the link when they saw this ad and they ended up filling the survey. But the visibility of the research itself, for example, is very, very high. So a lot of people see these links, and I do not exactly have like demographic data for that for this one, but I have like another project that I'll just briefly mention. So for me, what works best is making sure that most of the money is going towards participant incentive. And we've been successfully using Amazon vouchers, which is something I wish I could fix a little bit, give people more freedom. But at least with Indian participants, I know that Amazon vouchers are usually accepted and they're happy about it because they can also exchange it with like other apps or something. So we worked with Amazon vouchers. I think here, it's just about €1 and a little bit more. So it works out well in that regard. And then before I joined this network, I actually also, for my master thesis at Radboud, recruited Indian women specifically using Facebook ads. So I was getting there, and then I found this network. So that was quite perfect. And here you can see like much more information. This is, I only was interested in recruiting Indian women residing in India. And within 3 days, this advertisement reached over 70,000 women across all states and union territories. And this representation also then sort of trickled down into the 279 that actually ended up taking the survey. So in terms of the diversity and the reach, I have found this to be better than panel companies that I've worked with or Qualtrics even. So, and Qualtrics is so much more expensive. And I also personally like that when I create pages for these studies, participants can comment. And one of the comments that I got, which I will never forget for this study, was I restricted the age range for this study from 18 to 65, and a 68-year-old very nice woman said to me, "Why is it less than 65? Do you not think that people older than 65 also use social media?" Which, of course, as a young researcher, learning moment. But also the interaction part of it. And also I got a lot of emails also for the multiple labs project, people wanting to know more because these are people who are not on a panel. These are people who are on social media who will see an ad and be interested to take your survey, with good enough incentives, hopefully. So I kind of prefer recruiting on social media as opposed to with a panel company. I think the cost for this also was, well, for about 279 participants, it was 26 euros, and most of the money went to Amazon vouchers also for the participants, and then we had a donation task, so just $20 for donation. So as a research master student, this was perfect for me. It fitted my budget and allowed me to do good research. I am not stopping participant recruitment in social media. I am doubling down. As a social media researcher, we're also interested in studying content creators themselves. So we've become interested in sort of understanding values and perceptions of environmental content creators in India. And we've started this study. I have been able to recruit 2 participants via Meta. And then for an experiment as well, which is an online social media experiment, it makes sense to recruit participants again for this experiment via social media. So this will be on Instagram. And yeah, so these are the upcoming projects that I hopefully will, you will hear from me again about these projects in detail and how we did participant recruitment in India from these projects as well. And that's all I have for you. So thank you so much, and please keep in touch, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Shreya. That was fascinating and probably not easy to run through, your breadth of research in kind of 35 minutes. So well done. And it's really impressive that this is your PhD. So it's fantastic how you are using, the breadth of social media. You really kind of did a run through the main platforms there. So really great. So
Thanks.
we have one question by Piga here, who's, by the way, also a postdoc on DEMET, and he asked several questions. I'm just going to read them out one by one. We can answer them one by one. So what are the types of emotion displayed by people who tweeted in the sentiment analysis?
Oh, well, I mean, we mostly, wait, is this about Twitter or about TikTok? Because different results.
Okay, yeah, and then you can maybe compare.
Okay, perfect. So on Twitter, of course, we did find that a lot of the tweets were pro-environmental in nature. We actually only found, like, in one community, 2% of the tweets that were, negative. Most of these were indeed pro-environmental, whereas on Twitter, we found the most number of videos were neither pro nor anti. They were actually either ambiguous in the sense that they weren't clear, they were giving mixed messaging about their value for the environment, or they were neutral, that they never mentioned the environment, but still had hashtag environment-related hashtag in their caption. So again, I think depends on the social media platform. So already between the two, we could see different results.
Then the second question is, what is the extent of collaboration between environmental organizations, so the social actors, through retweets and so on? So you mentioned, I think, the network analysis, but you didn't talk too much about it. So I think you want to say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, okay, let's see. Right. I wonder if you can, oh no. Just a second. I do have the figures, but for some reason, the slides are hidden. So I will unhide them for you in a second, and then we can very quickly. Right. Right. So looking at the results themselves, we did find 9 types of communities that you should be able to see on your screen now. And like I said, despite that climate change was so common in these networks of users that every cluster is first named climate change and then named the secondary topic that emerged to be the most common. And in terms of interactions, we sort of did find considerable interaction between most of these communities. So, for example, CC Hope, which was more of a group of like people, regular users, as in like non-expert users, who are sort of taking a more optimistic, positive, journalistic approach to climate change and environmental issues, and people who sort of focus on the health effects of environmental crises interacted a lot. People who focused on taking climate action, people who were scientists interacted a lot. We also saw that scientists as well as knowledge, so this cluster mostly comprised of people who were non-academic experts working in the industry. They interacted a fair bit. People with a focus on sustainability, so brands who are advertising for sustainability also interacted with these industry people who were who we named CC Knowledge as opposed to CC Science, which was the more academic side. So, and only in few instances did we see that there were one-sided interactions. So, for example, people working in the energy industry followed the lay people, but the lay people did not follow them back as much, most likely because perhaps the discourse in this community would be very technical for some lay people to be interested in or to follow. And then only in a couple of cases, we found that there were no interactions or minimal interactions. So yeah, there actually was a considerable interaction, at least in the clusters that we found that were linked with each other. So
yeah. And then his last question is about kind of the discourse of environmental policy. If yes, does it happen? And if yes, which policies seem to be the most discussed? And also, how do governments maybe respond or tweet about environmental issues, given that you, especially on Twitter, I guess, have also quite a few governmental accounts in there. Yeah.
Right. I think, and this is a stark contrast that we saw between Twitter and TikTok. On TikTok, on Twitter, for example, because there was such a domination of the global north, also because we only looked at English language data, most of the national policies that were being discussed were in Australia, which was the most common, because I also did a geographical analysis of the users, and we did see that like a lot of users were from Australia. US, of course, was one hotspot, of course, and the UK. So not as much discussions emerged on Twitter with regards to like global South countries, whereas opposite side, countries like Chile, Honduras, Mexico, political candidates from there had their own TikTok channels, and they posted videos as long as 7 minutes, 8 minutes, just talking about local issues. So in that sense, we did see a little bit of a disparity in terms of more national policy in the global north being discussed, just like popular media, but also then on TikTok, it's more local candidates at smaller representatives at a smaller level who are really talking about like local issues to their audiences. So that's roughly a sketch of what we found. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I could you also maybe had
yes. Shreya, thank you very much. This was very rich. Really, it was really nice to listen to all the research you have done.
Thank
you. Forgive my ignorance if you dislike my questions, but I have two questions. I'm not very well equipped in methods or the field, but one question I have is like, how did you come up with the very first original keywords at the very first instance? I guess it is an inductive process. I mean, I'm thinking about my country, Turkey, and other Mediterranean countries, and like first of all, yeah, climate change as a term, it's not that commonly used. And when I'm thinking about environmental discourse, most of the discourse that we have is about wildfires, for example, because it's in the Mediterranean. There are so many fires in the summer and so on. So, for example, would that show up in your results, given that fires was not one of the words included there, or there may be so many other options as well. That is one of questions. The second question is a bit different. So are there, or do we have public opinion, cross-national public opinion, good public opinion data about climate change attitudes? I mean, I'm thinking about World Value Survey or that kind of stuff, and I cannot remember much. And if there are, like, how do your results, is there any, would your results talk to public opinion data? Okay, thank you very much again.
No, of course. Oh, great question. So how did I come up with the list? It was partly theoretical, of course, this planetary boundaries framework, because it highlights these like 9 issues. So we sort of tried to take these issues and convert them into keywords. So biosphere integrity was not just biosphere integrity. We sort of included then forests. And so it was an inductive process. In the first round, we looked at literature, but sadly only found maybe 5 different kinds of keywords that had been used: climate change, environment, sustainability, energy, and emissions. And then every other word sort of was based on this planetary boundaries framework. So it's a mix of previous research as well as this scientific framework. And then because I work in a team, the 4 of us sat down, came up with these words, which is also why we felt this need to validate these search terms, because we weren't sure how they would perform before like gathering these data and calling them like beyond climate change. So that was the way that we came up with this list. And then public opinion data. I know that public opinion, like national surveys, Yale climate attitudes has been done for quite some time now. I think at least 13 years. I know New Zealand Values and Attitudes Survey has questions about climate change beliefs. And so that has been done for, I think, a solid 30 years. In Europe, of course, we have the European Social Survey, ESS, yeah. So that also has questions about climate change. But that's the thing, like these surveys are mostly focusing on climate change. And for example, data from Americas shows that belief in climate change has increased. But because it remains such an abstract concept that that we're not sure what it means in terms of translating it into action or even awareness about these other issues which might affect people more. And you did mention that in Turkey, for example, there's a lot of discussion of wildfire. On Twitter, we did not see much discourse about wildfire. It was mostly Australian bushfires, because we collected data in April of 2021, which is when the wildfire had just ended, very devastating. But on TikTok, yes, we did find a lot of data relating to extreme weather events. So that's how we sort of categorized wildfires with the TikTok data. So yeah, it did end up translating. Wow, okay, I'm gonna. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, well, sure. Just dealing with the line again. Any more questions from the participants? No? I mean, maybe I had a question, like, because something that of course affects our research community is, we're always at the whim of these companies and the changes that they come up with. And I mean, they would happen to Twitter was really radical, right? Changing access to the API in the way they did. And you of course discussed that briefly, but yeah, I wanted to kind of hear more about your thoughts about this. How can we, what does that mean for our research, and how can we deal with this in an effective way? Because that affects all kind of things, right? Related to, we have now in social sciences much more culture of replication that's not really possible anymore. And so yeah, what do you think? Is that the end of research using Twitter as a platform? So yeah, maybe you can just and maybe just kind of say again, if you have any questions. I just saw somebody raising their hand. Just put them in the Q&A. That would be really helpful. Okay, yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is, it has to come from a place of passion, because I really was frustrated, and I continue to be frustrated as the future of the platform itself stays quite in doubt still. And Twitter had amassed quite a bit of academic Twitter, like it's such a great thing, but now no one's actually like no one's on Twitter, and they're not having fun if they're on Twitter. It's a very like one-sided discussion. Having said that, I don't want to be hopeless, of course. And I also know of some work that has been done at University of Toronto, where they've managed to get into like a 5-year partnership with Meta, and there's actually the ethics and transparency are being handled by the University of Toronto, and Meta is okay with that. So I would feel that I think this project is only 2 years in, but it should be something to look forward to, a collaboration of that scale between an industry, Meta, and an academic institution. So, and this is the kind of work that I also would like to do, because really, truly, we are at the whims of social media companies. Because even if I come up with this list of 50 words, if I'm running an experiment based on my findings, I still can't control the algorithm. So it's, yeah, either I have to use a simulator, which is just not the real environment in this attention economy. So I feel like that is research. We have to keep finding ways and, try and collaborate and find partnerships. Yeah, I feel like I was speaking with someone who works for WhatsApp's integrity team, and they said that their focus is on maintaining the infrastructure for the millions of messages being sent every day. And that was slightly disappointing. But of course, if we keep talking about ethics and integrity and transparency, then hopefully, they'll come around to it.
Yeah, I mean, we have collaborated, of course, multiple times with Meta, who came, to give talks, and they definitely seem to be much more interested in collaborating with researchers and more open. I mean, it's still, a business, so I think ultimately they have their own interest, but it's definitely been a very positive experience to see the products that they develop, and they really do try to be transparent and be a platform that works with researchers. So yeah, it's interesting that Twitter is just kind of going completely the other way at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, I mean, maybe this is happening now, and who knows what's happening in a few years, right? It is changing, so it could also change again in the other direction. We have one more question by Su Ling, who asked that you talked about kind of individuals as kind of social media actors, and do you know more about them? I guess it's a difficult one, but are they activists, are they influencers, or just kind of ordinary users?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
any background on this? Or I mean, I guess that's also what you're trying to do maybe with your new project,
yeah,
of recruiting activists on social media now to find out more about them. But what do you know so far about them?
Yeah, so within these individuals, like I said, unlike Twitter, the bios of TikTok users they aren't as elaborate. So it's mostly based on the content that we were able to sort of categorize these users. And I guess we could have looked at a number of followers to sort of determine whether these were regular users, activists, or influencers. But I can definitely tell you that this is also something we're struggling with theoretically. So we define individual users who post about the environment as environmental content creators. But of course, for them to be influencers, they need to have a substantial following. But it becomes slightly more complicated when you actually look at the content of influencers and activists and regular users who have a massive following, because influencers also post about going for protesting and voting, and activists also form partnerships with brands that they actually believe in. So it's not quite a dichotomy, but a spectrum, I would say. And we're trying to understand that, at least in the Indian context, as to if certain different values, environmental values, guide these individual users differently, so that, they focus more on activist versus influencing and stuff like that. So at least like a rudimentary understanding understanding is that activism is more, collective behavior, whereas influencers more individual lifestyle-based behavior when it comes to the environment. Ordinary users post once in a while about the environment, and we definitely saw a fair bit of just ordinary users in our TikTok study. So yeah.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then yeah, what we have left is just to thank Shreya for her excellent talk and yeah, giving us such an overview of your research. Good luck with all the upcoming projects.
Thank you.
And yeah, do come back to talk more about your new work once it's done. This concludes our spring sessions. We had 2 this time, so we want to continue this. This is a lot of fun, and we do get a lot of really positive feedback that we're helping researchers from all over the place, because social media has this potential to allow research to be done in many different contexts, which you again showed us today, right, Shreya? With the low cost of recruiting research participants, for example, in India. So this is a community. So if you have ideas, you want to present something, do get in touch, and we can continue doing this. So the plan is again to put on a couple of 2-3 sessions, whatever the interest is, sometime maybe in November. That usually is the time we do the autumn series. So just get in touch if you have ideas. But yeah, again, thank you very much, Shreya. And as always, we will put the video on YouTube if you want to kind of watch this again and learn more about it. Okay.
Right. Bye-bye. Thanks.